At 8:43 on a rain-dark Thursday in Providence, the room went so quiet you could hear the court reporter stop breathing. Senator Daniel Mercer was standing in the aisle of Municipal Courtroom 2, jacket open, tie loosened, finger pointed straight at Judge Frank Caprio's bench. The senator's voice had already climbed past anger into that dangerous place where powerful men stop performing and start revealing themselves. "You're finished," he said. "You won't have this bench by Friday." Nobody moved. Not the clerk, not the bailiff, not the three defendants waiting against the back wall with paper folders in their hands. Judge Caprio just looked over the rim of his glasses, one hand resting beside a stack of citation files, the other still on the yellow legal pad where he had been making notes seconds earlier. Outside, water ran down the courthouse windows in gray sheets. Inside, the air felt thinner by the second. And what made the moment so explosive was not that a senator had just threatened a sitting judge in open court. It was that everyone in that room suddenly understood this had nothing to do with the parking ticket on the docket. This was something older, dirtier, bigger. Because powerful people do not walk into a courtroom before 9 in the morning to threaten a judge over a routine hearing, unless the judge is standing on top of something they cannot afford to let him uncover. And by that point, Judge Caprio had already started pulling on one thread that led from a dismissed citation to a private towing contract, from that contract to campaign money, and from campaign money to a quiet system that punished ordinary drivers while protecting connected families from consequences. What looked at first glance like a petty clash between a temperamental politician and an elderly judge was actually the beginning of a public collapse. A man who thought the courthouse answered to him had just picked the one room in the city where everything had to be said on the record, and once that happened, there was no putting it back. The case that morning belonged to a 26-year-old named Evan Mercer, the senator's son. His black Range Rover had collected 6 parking citations over 11 months around Benefit Street, Westminster, and a fire lane outside a private club on South Main. Total fines, $1,460. Not life-changing money for the son of a state senator. But the file had something unusual in it. 3 of the citations had already been marked for administrative review, then mysteriously reactivated, then flagged again with handwritten initials that did not match any court employee. Judge Caprio noticed because he always noticed paperwork that had been touched too many times. That alone might have stayed small. Clerical confusion happens. What changed the temperature was the name on the towing paperwork attached to 2 of the citations, Harbor View Recovery, a politically connected contractor that had been winning city impound referrals at unusually high rates since 2022. Harbor View's owner, Paul Rinaldi, was not just another vendor. He was one of Senator Mercer's largest donors, bundling nearly $84,000 across state races and PAC events in 18 months. And then came the detail that turned routine into radioactive. A court clerk, off the record at first, told Caprio that staff had received 2 calls the night before the hearing. One came from a legislative aide asking whether the judge would clear this discreetly. The second came from someone who did not leave a name but said, "The senator expects professional courtesy." Professional courtesy. In a courtroom, that was when the story stopped being ordinary. Because ordinary people never got professional courtesy. Maria Santos, a home health aide from Cranston, had nearly lost her license the same spring over $320 in overdue citations after her car was towed from a legal curb cut she had photographs proving was unmarked. A retired machinist named Leonard Pike spent 3 months fighting storage fees after Harbor View held his truck through a holiday weekend. They waited, paid, pleaded, and filled out forms. Nobody called on their behalf. Nobody spoke the magic language of expectation. That asymmetry was the whole story in miniature. 2 systems occupying the same city, one made of rules, the other made of names. If you appreciate stories where power finally meets consequences, subscribe, because this is where the mask began to slip. When Evan Mercer's matter was called, the senator did not sit in the gallery like every other relative in that room. He walked straight to counsel table, though he was not the attorney of record, and started speaking before the clerk had finished reading the case number. Caprio stopped him once, calmly, then twice. By the third interruption, the judge's tone changed. "Senator, you may take a seat or you may leave, but you will not conduct this court." That was when Mercer said the line about Friday, and Caprio answered with the response that detonated the room. He leaned forward, voice low enough that everyone had to strain to hear it. "Then say it properly, on the record. Tell this court you want a judge removed because your family does not like its paperwork." It was surgical. No shouting, no theatrics, just one invitation. Make the threat explicit, tie it to the file. Let the transcript carry it farther than any rumor ever could. Mercer froze for half a second, and in politics, half a second is an eternity. He realized too late what Caprio had done. The judge had moved the fight out of the senator's comfort zone. No backhaul, no donor dinner, no private pressure. If Mercer kept talking, he would be confessing motive in front of a bailiff, a court reporter, two attorneys, and a room full of citizens with phones in their pockets. He tried to pivot, said he was concerned about selective treatment, said the judge had personal animus, said the court had been irregular. The problem was proof, because Caprio, who had spent 40 years watching people unravel when facts arrived in the wrong order, already had the clerk bring up the continuance log. Then the towing referral history, then the authorization stamps. In less than 6 minutes, the hearing stopped being about Evan Mercer's unpaid tickets and became a live demonstration of something much worse. 31 Harbor View-related citation files had been altered in the previous 14 months. 22 involved reductions or dismissals. 17 were tied to vehicles registered to donors, staff relatives, or business associates connected to Senator Mercer's political network. And 6 of those files had access logs showing after-hours review from a terminal used by the City Traffic Bureau administrator, a man who also happened to attend Mercer's waterfront fundraiser at the Bellevue Hotel the previous October. That was the center of gravity. The room felt it immediately. Not suspicion anymore. Pattern. Not influence in theory, influence in sequence. Then investigators found the detail that changed everything. When Caprio ordered the suspicious files preserved and referred to the city solicitor, a deputy clerk mentioned that courthouse security had recently upgraded hallway cameras outside records. Footage from the previous Monday showed Harbor View owner Paul Rinaldi entering the administrative corridor at 7:12 p.m. with Senator Mercer's chief of staff. No public counter, no appointment logged. They left 18 minutes later carrying nothing visible, but the access terminal and records had been activated during that exact window. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because Mercer still thought he could bully his way through the optics. By noon, his office issued a statement calling the judge senile, theatrical, and unfit for modern municipal administration. It was a brutal mistake. Caprio was not just a judge. He was a public symbol in Rhode Island, especially to the people who believed the courthouse was the one place where dignity still belonged to ordinary citizens. By 3 p.m., the clip had spread across local television and every Providence political phone line. The senator threatening the bench, the judge inviting him to repeat it on the record, the silence afterward. It was devastating, not because it was loud, but because it was disciplined. Mercer looked like exactly what he was. A man used to moving institutions by force, suddenly discovering one institution could look back. If you believe no one is above accountability, stay with me, because the consequences came faster than even his allies expected. The city solicitor referred the file to the Rhode Island State Police Public Corruption Unit within 48 hours. The Ethics Commission opened its own review. Harbor View's municipal referral agreement was suspended pending audit. Bank records later showed 3 consulting payments totaling $62,500 from Harbor View to a shell LLC controlled by Mercer's brother-in-law. Campaign reports showed those payments landing within weeks of favorable contract renewals. A grand jury subpoena followed in less than a month, and then the human costs surfaced in full, not donors, not insiders, regular people. A dialysis patient whose car had been impounded outside a pharmacy because a temporary disability placard had been entered incorrectly. A single father who missed 2 days of work trying to retrieve a van from Harbor View storage. a restaurant dishwasher whose registration lapsed after cascading fees he could never catch up to. They had all paid into a system that was apparently discounting consequences for the well-connected. That was what turned outrage into moral clarity. Senator Mercer resigned from the Judiciary Committee first, then from office 19 days later when federal investigators executed warrants on his campaign office and a Warwick storage unit tied to his chief fundraiser. Rinaldi was charged with bribery, records tampering, and conspiracy. 2 city employees took immunity deals. Evan Mercer, the son who started the public hearing, ended up pleading no contest to the citation fraud component and paying restitution that was trivial compared to what his last name had cost everyone else. Judge Caprio was never fired. In fact, the attempt to remove him did the opposite. The chief judge publicly backed him. The Bar Association condemned the threat. Even people who disagreed with him politically understood the line that had been crossed. But the reason the story lasted was not simply that a senator fell, it was how he fell. Not in some cinematic raid under floodlights, not in a screaming arrest on the courthouse steps. He fell because, for one arrogant minute, he believed a courtroom was just another room, another place where title beat truth, another place where rank could bend the record. He forgot what courts are for. They are the one place in public life where a lie has to survive its own transcript. And on that wet Providence morning with rain on the windows and a room full of people who knew exactly what fairness feels like when it has been denied too long, Judge Caprio gave him every chance to hear himself before the city did. That is the part that stays with people, not the senator's threat, not even the investigation. It is the image of a man in a robe, old enough to know that anger is wasted when the record will do the work for you, looking down at power and refusing to flinch, because in the end Mercer did not lose to a speech, he lost to a sentence. Then say it properly, on the record. And just like that, the court stopped belonging to the powerful man standing in it, and started belonging again to everyone who had ever walked in hoping the truth still counted. If cases like this make you think, let me know in the comments. That is why stories like this travel. They are not really about one senator or one judge. They are about the moment arrogance meets a system that finally functions as intended. The moment entitlement walks in certain it owns the room, and walks out having taught the entire country why it never did.